Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Hiring and Inspiring. Today's guest is David Stuart Watt. David is a fellow recruitment professional. He is a connection of mine. We met a couple of years ago. He's been in recruitment, I think, similar sort of time to me, so similar age as well. So we've been on similar journeys. I know he's very passionate about the industry and he's very good at what he does. So I'm hoping to have a chat to him today. Find out a little bit more about what makes him tick, what gets him going, how he's been getting on, and to just chat all things recruitment, really. So, David,
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show, mate. Really appreciate it.
no worries, most welcome. So, firstly, just to kick things off, it's probably about a couple of years ago, I think, when we initially met and connected. Just
Yep.
broadly speaking, mate, how you been? How's the last couple of years sort of treated you?
Yeah, it's been good, I think getting through a very interesting few years. I think everyone was going through the COVID and the negative spiel and all that. Then obviously the market and recruitment surged, right? And I think, like many out there, the last 12 to 18 months has proven to be probably some of the best times that I've ever seen in recruitment. And I think many of my peers and people I know in the industry around me are saying the same thing. So I think from a, purely financial standpoint or business standpoint, it's been fantastic, right? Great couple of years. Which we're sort of in, not a plateau at the moment, but probably starting to see things correct back to, I guess, the way they were, right? Which is still not a bad thing because I remember the peaks of 18 and 19 and still fantastic markets. But I think overall recruitment and myself, it's been a really solid few years, and I think that will continue on
Mm.
seemingly. And then personal front, mate, can't complain. Lost more
Yeah.
hair, but I never had much to begin with, so never a problem. And luckily, I can grow slightly unpatchy beard, so I'm very thankful that hair grows at least somewhere on my head, right?
I'm the opposite, man. I can't grow anything on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
on the
Maybe we'll need to trade genes a little bit, half half or something.
Yeah, good stuff. So you mentioned the last couple of years has been, I guess buoyant times, good times for you professionally. How do you feel maybe you've progressed in the
Yeah.
last couple of years? What sort of skills have you really demonstrated that has allowed you to sort of maybe take advantage of the buoyant market
Of the
conditions?
buoyant
Say,
market. Yeah, sure. And I guess to give some context to the audience as well, so I specialize in accounting and finance recruitment. I look after qualified and exec work here with you and you.
yeah,
Geographically, I actually do a lot of my work out in the West. So I've seen a lot of, I guess, growth over the years anyway in that industrial sort of logistics and manufacturing space out there. So
yeah,
I'd pretty much look after anything from, your Parramatta, Homebush through to your suburban areas of Sydney. So that's
okay,
been the market I've looked at. In terms of what skill sets I've acquired, I think it's really honing in on, some of the basics, right? Doing better candidate activity, more candidate activity. I think continuing with BD activity. I think what I noticed over the last 18 months, a lot of people probably let that side go a little bit and, we're just more focused on honestly filling roles that were coming in, and it was that time. But I think something I did and was very conscious of is that, it's always a balancing act. And the reality was the market wasn't going to stay at the peak forever. So I think
mm,
having a combination of doubling down on, existing business development and then new business development, whilst also potentially refining and just spending more time on candidate generation, trying to think outside the box in
yeah,
terms of maybe LinkedIn and passive marketing to actually attract people to me that I didn't know in the finance community.
mm,
I would say that, social media presence in general, I've never seen such a huge uplift in usage and expectations from people to see what you're actually posting and look at your content and see what makes you stand out versus the hundreds of other agents that do exactly what you do. So I
yeah,
think the biggest learn I had was how to actually use social media from a business perspective. Like I'll admit that before that, LinkedIn was a bit of a whatever for me. It was just a professional network, I guess. But I've come to really understand and, I guess utilize that platform a lot more from a
yeah,
purely business perspective. And
yeah.
I think that's a massive learn for me. I'd never really used it like that before.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that, but just
Yeah,
previously, when you were talking about the candidate care and
sure.
those creation of the candidates, because I feel that was the real in the last couple of years when it's been a general candidate shortage across most industries, sectors, geographical regions. The real value add for a good recruiter is bringing talent to their client's table that isn't necessarily applying to that, but sort of, the low hanging
Yeah.
fruit that's out there. It's really generating and creating that candidate, so to speak,
Yeah.
without wanting to sort of give away all your secrets. Um, how have you, and also that candidate care, like really building deep seated relationship with candidates? How do you tend to go
Mm.
about, say, finding that superstar candidate for maybe
Yeah.
in a tight market?
Okay. So look, I think a lot of, recruiters out there would be utilizing, your ads and your back ends of Seeks and LinkedIn. I think that's all pretty standard stuff. I think really
Mm.
doubling down on the referral network. You can probably
Yeah,
tell by the way I sort of talk, right? But I'm a very mateship based person. I truly believe in getting to know people, fairly intimately.
yeah,
And that's not probing with inappropriate questions. It's just more getting to understand an individual, what makes them tick, what their motivators are outside of work, right? I think it's very easy in recruitment to fall into a trap of just seeing a candidate's resume or, seeing someone and then being like, oh, perfect, they're good for that role, but not really
yeah,
listening to actually
yeah.
what they want. And so I think in terms of, for me, I get to know people at that level, hopefully give them a pretty good experience, and then honestly leverage on them and tap into their networks. Because if they're a financial accountant working in a large listed business, they've probably got another five peers doing a very similar thing in a very similar high quality of people that I want. And I think if you really do double down and, maybe deliver the service they're looking for, they'll
Mm.
naturally refer you to other people that you can also place. So I think I utilized that referral piece
Yeah.
massively. I would also call clients that I knew quite well to ask if they would know anyone for a
Mm.
suitable role. And, kind of going back to my point around balancing BD and candidate activity, it was a really great shout to call a client out of the blue. Hey, it's been a while. Look, I'm recruiting for this role. I know it's not for you, but do you happen to know anyone that might be suitable? So for me, I think it was really leveraging relationships I had, but
Yeah.
also approaching and, chatting with candidates and getting to know them in detail so they
Yeah.
would then refer me to people I can use as well.
Yeah.
That's truly what I think I did slightly
Yeah.
differently, I guess.
Yeah. It sounds like, guess, in your field, that financial market, you're pretty well known, right? So it's about being
Hopefully.
it's about networking super hard in your industry. It's something I always think about. It's something I maybe
Mm,
regret from my early days of recruitment. I didn't necessarily build those deep relationships. It was more just about make a call, move on, whatever. Seeing a candidate or a client as a number rather
mm.
than a person, and actually really building those relationships and getting your name out there. It sounds like that's something you've done, and that's what allowed you to have success most recently.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. I think I've always valued it. You see a lot of stuff out there, especially on LinkedIn again, to reference a
Yeah.
platform, with recruiters putting up the typical stories or, things that shouldn't happen in recruitment, but they happen every day. So,
Mm.
there's always a complaint about ghosting, right? Which is
Yeah.
which we kind of find ironic because you see every recruiter post about it, they still do it. Like, and it's. I don't think I'm sitting here saying I'm absolutely perfect. I'm not, right? I'm sure
Mm.
I've unfortunately done similar things to people over the years, but I think if you're just conscious of it and you're actively trying to do the right thing in every interaction you have with someone, it would usually result in a much better experience for them. The thing that I was always taught very early on was, a candidate might only look for a job 5 times in their entire career, right, for a permanent role. And
Mm.
that's not a lot of times, not a lot of interactions. And I think we, as you might have done early days as well, because we're talking umpteen dozen every day, it becomes very monotonous and routine for us. But for them, that's, you might be only one of three people they've spoken to for months. And so I've
Mm.
always kept that in the back of my mind and thought with every interaction I've had, it's as simple as you get one impression and one chance to show them who you are. And I think it is easy to forget that.
Yeah, no, great point. Love that. You touched upon LinkedIn then multiple times. How are
Yep.
you, and how have you really
Mm.
leveraged that platform to help you in your role? And also, you mentioned that your relationships evolved over the last few years. What's changed?
What's changed? Yeah. So I think LinkedIn became less of a platform to just connect and more of a platform to interact, right? So I think,
Yeah.
in my opinion, I've watched some, excellent recruiters here with you and, people in my network that have, engaged regularly. They've used it to just simply connect people, simple stuff. Hey, Joe saw Jimmy might be looking for a role, mate, here's his
Yeah.
details, things like that. But I think also, producing relevant quality content for your market, it just allows you to reach a much wider audience. So,
Mm.
I made a really conscious effort when I joined you about 3 or 4 years ago to start actually connecting a lot more with just relevant people, financial accountants, management
Yeah.
account, everything, and just passively connecting all the time. So it wasn't a KPI, but I'd sort of set myself a certain number a week to connect with that many professionals that I thought I could help, or that would one day be relevant for me. And I think actually just having that consistent stream of additions, you build a
Yeah.
good foundation, you get more connections, and then you
Mm.
meet better people, and then hopefully from a business side, when you do need a role or you do genuinely need to look for people, you've got them in your network already. So I
Yeah.
think that also has helped to make the sourcing process from our side a little bit easier, because these people already know your name. Like yourself, Joe, you're putting yourself out there. When you reach out, you're no longer a random recruiter. Oh yeah, Joe Cutler, I've seen his stuff. I remember him.
Mm. Yeah. I think it goes back to what we are talking about networking, right? I think
Yeah,
at its core, people forget that LinkedIn was created as a networking platform.
yeah,
It sort of became, well, firstly, maybe initially like a, place where it's like your online CV, a
mm,
place you might find a job, but its actual core is to build connections, right? That's the main at the heart of what it was created for. And I think people tend
yeah.
to get away from that. It's like all the social selling and building a presence. Yeah, but it's actually
It's just
a good place to
connecting,
connect.
right?
Yeah,
And I think it's simple stuff like, just, hey, quick coffee, do you want to catch up? Hey, have you spoken to this guy for
yeah,
a while? I think it's those little tiny interactions that probably seem like nothing at the time
yeah,
or don't feel very, valuable. But I think the more of them you do, like, I know it's a bit cliche, but kind of the luckier you get. People just
yeah,
remember it.
for sure. So back to the sort of the state of the market, you mentioned in your space it sort of corrected itself a little bit this year in terms of
Yeah,
that balance, right? Um, in terms of your, and this is flipping it to the BD side of recruitment.
sure.
What's the sort of current state of the market in that much? How much time are you spending doing BD at the moment? Let's say in your
NBD.
role.
Okay, cool. So I think in general, right, what I've seen over the last 12 months is, a massive disparity in salary. I'm sure you've probably seen it in
Yeah,
sales as well, Joe, where I think expectations from candidates is high, and clients probably 6 to 12 months ago were meeting those expectations, or that they had to, because they simply probably weren't getting talent otherwise, right?
mm.
I would say that has now not stopped, but it's certainly slowed down. So I think businesses, somehow or for whatever reason, are probably, conscious of how much they're actually paying, and they're probably willing to wait a little longer
Okay.
to get someone if it means less money. And so I've seen a bit of not a headbutting, but almost like a meeting in the market, a bit of a
Yeah.
frustrating meet where you've got expectations here and offers here, and
Okay.
it's just not matching. So I think that's what's slowed it in some sense. But again, I still think it's a correction.
Yeah.
In terms of how much time I would then have to spend on BD a week, it's hard to give a percentage weighting. I try to do it every day.
Yeah.
That'd be a combination of passive and active BD, which is just marketing versus calls and meetings and the usual stuff. But I think if I had to give a weighting for you, mate, it's probably about 40% of my week would be spent
Yeah.
doing genuine business development activities, where I'm out there seeing clients, calling people,
Yeah.
sending through mailers and floats, which you would obviously know in recruitment, and things like that.
With that BD activity, then do
Mm.
you like block out time, say in your calendar, to do it? Because I feel a lot of recruiters, salespeople, they kind of always put it on. Yeah, I'll do it later, or it's always everything else takes priority ahead of doing
Yeah.
BD a lot of the time. For me, it helps when I do it. I'm just like, right, from this time, whatever. I'm the same. Like I don't do it all the time, but from whatever 9 to 11 in that morning, that's what I'm doing BD, and I just put it aside. Is that something you do as well?
Yeah, so I think I'll go back to sort of my roots, right? So when I first
Yeah.
started in recruitment, I worked for a company where I was on basically a graduate program, right?
Yeah.
And it was essentially a copy paste of probably the Michael Page or Hayes program, where you have call times locked in and allocated for BD, like a 9 to 11, you do this, you have to get this many calls. So I was always trained that way, and I guess that's
Yeah.
always stuck with me. Now I'll be honest, I'm not as rigid anymore with specific time
Mm.
slots, but I tend to eat the frog. So if I ever catch myself in a mindset of what you said, which is, oh, I'll do it later or whatever it is, I just
Yeah.
do it immediately. As soon as
Yeah.
I think that, I just do it because I know if I put it off, I'll never do it again. So I'm sure we've all had times where we sit there and we go, I've got to call Joe. You know what? I'll do it in 2 hours. I will literally call the number on the spot and force myself to have the conversation
Yeah.
because otherwise I find you just fall into the trap of not doing it. So
Mm.
it's not necessarily rigid times, Joe, but
Mm.
I try to do things early in the morning when I'm
Yeah.
freshest.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. So you touched upon that your early days, that
Mm.
graduate program, when you were, really just hitting the phones,
Yep.
very KPI driven type environment.
Yep.
Pretty, we've all been there. We're pretty tough. How do you look back on that period? Because for me, I look back on that period like it was tough, but I'm thankful for it because I learned so much about the role and myself. How do you reflect on that? I guess your early
Yeah.
days in recruitment.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I think the hill to climb, so to speak, or the frustration of having to do that last call to hit the magic 50 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I look back on it fondly now because I think if I didn't do that, where would I be? Like I might not
Mm.
even be in recruitment, right? If I didn't adhere to some targets, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are so scared of the word KPI or targets these days, almost like calling it some I don't know some new name or whatever. The
Yeah.
reality is they're there to just give you structure, right? It's to give you an idea of how to set up a week to be successful. And
Mm.
I think they're still the fundamentals I follow today. If sometimes I'm having a bit of an off week or I feel like something's low, I'll go, well, did I do the activity that I know is going to get me the success? And honestly in your own heart if
Yeah.
the answer's no.
Yeah.
And if you're in your head, you get to the end of the week, you're like, right, I called one client this week, don't have a lot of jobs, probably why, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, do you still think there's a place for that sort of, old school type approach? Because I feel like the industry has gone away from it the last couple of years. Um, but
Mm.
what you just said, like that, going back to the numbers, if I haven't made much calls, then that's the proof of why I haven't had a great week. Um,
Yeah, it's without sounding too controversial, old school. I mean, despite
yeah,
being bald, man, I'm only 30. I do think there is a place for that. Like, I was very thankful when I was, I don't know, 22 or 23, whatever it was, entering the industry that I actually
yeah,
had a structure to follow. And again, I
yeah,
truly don't know if I would be the recruiter I am today without someone just kind of going, here's the guidebook, right? Here's the basics.
yeah.
Do the basics right, and you'll be okay. And I think for a lot of newer people entering the industry, again, right, people are scared of the targets or scared of that, but they do set you up for success. Like I think in sales,
Mm,
it's always going to be that element of target and activity driven. That's the role. It is a sales role at the end of the day. And
mm.
in my opinion, I think with recruitment, I never deceive myself into thinking it was anything other than sales.
Yeah,
Yes, there's a human element. No, you're not selling water bottles, but
yeah.
at the end of the day, that sales component is always going to be there and it'll always be critical, in my opinion.
Mm, mm. So you've obviously been, in the industry for a while, right? You've stuck
Mm,
around.
I've stuck around, yeah, somehow.
what what what's what's made you stick around? Why haven't you gone try your hand at something else? What is it about the
Mm,
industry and doing the job that keep
mm.
gets you up in the morning every day and keep coming at it?
Yeah, I could say a lot of cliche things. I think number one, everyone will say this is financials, right? At the end of the
Yeah,
day, the money you can earn in recruitment or the potential is very high in comparison to similar level roles in other sectors. That is an
yeah,
honest truth. I do genuinely love talking to people though. Like I've always been a very people focused person. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I just love helping everyone out there. It's probably more I just honestly love hearing people's stories. I've always found it fascinating to see what makes someone tick or what their journey is. And I think I've always loved the idea of the chase in a
yeah,
way, right? So I've actually personally always been really attracted to the client side where, you get that satisfaction of almost breaking down a theoretical cold door and
yeah,
turning someone who, told you to F off a few times into a warm client. Like I think that's an unparalleled feeling. And I love that element of it. I think it's
yeah.
yeah, it's character building
Mm,
and it is very rewarding
mm,
personally when you do get there, I think.
mm. It's obviously lots of ups and downs in recruitment.
Yeah.
month to month, day to day, even hour to hour
Yeah.
sometimes. But if
Always.
you if you sort of look back on your
Mm.
you know career, the 7 or 8 years you've been doing this, has there been a time where there's been a real downtime where you've thought, I don't know if I can keep doing this, or
Oh,
it's sort
definitely.
of,
Yeah. Like,
yeah,
yeah, yours yesterday, mate. No, I do. Yeah, you definitely go through the peaks and troughs
yeah,
emotionally. Again, early on, I was very thankful. I was told that pretty much one of the first things I ever taught was, "Hey, this is your emotions. Expect it. So you need to kind of
yeah,
try and stay level." Now, I mean, we're not bloody robots, right? We're not going to sit
of
here
course, yeah,
without any response of a feeling. But I think what got me through the troughs and the tougher times where I was going, I don't want to do this. This is shocking. I mean, I might just go back and
yeah,
be an accountant or something, like my roots were. I think it's just having other pillars outside of work. And I know it sounds again a little bit cliche, but just reflecting on what you've actually got and
yeah,
what the actual problem is. And you probably realize you're making a bit of a mountain out of a molehill. Like, I'll always be very thankful. Was born in England, grew up in Australia. I've been fairly blessed throughout my life. At the end of the day, a candidate not taking a role that seems very frustrating at the time is probably kind of a
yeah,
minuscule issue compared to other people out there.
yeah,
So I've always tried to take that view. And again, it's easier said than done. There's always going to be days where you just throw the phone and get angry. But I think it's being able to take your moment and then come back and just reflect and go, you know what? It is what it is. Move on.
yeah. That healthy dose of perspective, I always call it.
Yeah, a bit of perspective I think helps. And again, I'm not pointing fingers here, but I think a lot of people that I've seen enter newly struggle with that
Mm.
perspective.
Well, yeah, what is it about that? Because it's, I think when you maybe lose a deal or something early on in your recruitment career, you have it's always harder than when you lose. Now I'm, similar to you, been doing it a long time. When I lose something, I'm almost, I just brush it off, cool, whatever, go
Yeah.
again. But when at the start, I'll just get down, I'll be like, oh, I'll be crying about it all afternoon. You know, is it just experience and just like putting in the reps and just having been there before? Is that, do you think? Because I'm trying to figure that out myself.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I think back to when, like yourself, right? First year and a candidate didn't take a job and it was almost like a knife in the heart, right? That's the
Yeah.
feeling you had. I think you're right. I think the years you just come to expect it, to be like a
Mm.
little bit cynical, right? I feel like every recruiter ends up a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit cynical and just expects the worst. Um, but I also think, if I look at my general emotional intelligence and EQ, like I would say when I was a young 20-year-old male, I probably wasn't very emotionally intelligent at all. Like, I don't
Mm.
think I understood even why I felt certain things. So I think as you age or as you recognize it, and if you work on it, you can change your mindset and you can actually do the reps, so to speak, to adjust and not get affected by things. And that's not just in work. I think that's
Yeah.
just in everything.
Yeah.
You know
Do
what
you
I mean?
think that like that has helped you in life in general? Those
Hmm.
being able to ride the ups and downs, has developed that emotional intelligence, outside of your
Yeah,
career.
I do believe so. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to thank recruitment for saving my life or anything like that, but I think I think that you do develop some interesting skills that are very relevant for life.
Yeah.
Resilience is a big one. Understanding that life isn't, all roses and peaches, and sometimes it's punching you very hard in the face. But the reality is that that's work, but that is also just every day, right? That is
Yeah.
that is the reality of a life. And so I personally think recruitment, and another reason I love it, is it does actually teach you some of those skills that translate in every aspect. Whether or not you want to translate it is up to you, but I think you actually have that opportunity to do it. And it is kind of in a way thanks to the job.
Mm. Yeah. Gotcha. Love it. Nice. Spot on.
Yeah.
So, mate, we've talked about the current state of things. We talked about the past a little bit. Flipping up, to the future.
Mm.
What's the future hold for you? What can I expect from you in the next, say, couple of years?
Yeah. Girl, I don't know. Maybe a Victoria move. No,
Okay, yeah, okay.
no, I'm joking. For myself, look, I think it's just, further ingraining myself in my market.
Yeah.
Even though 7 years or 8 years seems like a long time, it's really not. Um, Probably just continuing to do what I do. I'm hoping to do some more maybe event series and, different
Okay, nice.
ideas to add value to the community I'm in. But hopefully in a few years, you'll see me more embedded in the market and, yeah, hopefully the go-to guy, right? As you said before. But I know I'm up against some greats out there. So I think it's, knowing where you're at, but just keeping on, mate. Just keeping doing
Yeah.
what you're doing.
And more sort of senior role within your business, leadership, that kind of thing. What's is that in the pipeline, you think?
Yeah, good question. I think leadership's an interesting one. I think there's probably a couple of pathways logically here, which is,
Okay.
as you said, go down a leadership perspective, or honestly just be a specialist in your market and continue to build and build
Yeah.
high. As to which pathway I would want, it's not sure at this point in time. I
Mm.
think I see the pros and cons of both, but at the moment, it's probably just seeing how things pan out and reflecting over the financial year end maybe to think about those sort of questions, Joe. But yeah, I'm not sure
Mm.
actually.
No, fair enough.
I'm
Yeah, fair enough.
enjoying it too much.
Yeah, well, that's probably your answer, mate. You don't
Yeah,
want to, if you're enjoying it, you don't want to, mess it up too much.
don't want to mess it
What
up.
about predictions for recruitment? What you mentioned a few things there, events, that kind of thing. How do you think the industry is going to evolve in the next? I know that's not an easy question to answer, by the way. How do you think it's going to evolve? You don't have a crystal ball, I
Yeah,
imagine,
yeah, I was gonna say I'll just pull it out of the drawer. So I think there's a lot of fear around automation, right? Like
yeah, 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 yeah.
let's be honest, Chat GPT, all this sort of stuff, it's been a bit of a hurrah for 3 months, right? And I feel like if you jump on LinkedIn, you'll see definitely some posts saying we're done. Yeah, our job will be made redundant at some point. So I think that's interesting. I expect AI to definitely play a larger part in recruitment, but in my opinion, it's going to eliminate the aspects of the role that we probably don't want to do anyway, the admin, the boring stuff, blah, blah, blah. If anything, it will further push recruiters to ingrain themselves with relationships and actually
Yeah.
add value. I think there won't be a time of just, hey, do you have a job for me or not? You will actually need to be out there seeing people and giving them a reason to want to like you. So I
Mm.
personally think the industry is going to have a huge shift, which we've already started to see in terms of relationship building. The old days of just transactional recruitment and plugging bums on seats, I think is probably gone. And I think it'll continue to dissipate as things progress moving forward.
Yeah, yeah,
That's just my
gotcha.
opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Matt, and one final one for me.
Sure.
This is, you can take this sort of any which way you like, and this is, it could be personally, professionally. It's around the idea of success.
Mm.
So, success to you, what does that mean? What does success mean to you?
Hmm. So, all right, it's going to be a bit of a long-winded answer, Joe. So I'm just preparing you
Yeah,
here. It's
I'll strap myself in.
yeah, strap yourself in, mate. Uh, I think success comes in many forms. I think it's easy to define success as someone who looks successful, right? They've got the nice suit, they're doing well at work, they've got the money behind them. I've always had a belief of some key pillars in my life, right? So you got your health, personal interests, hobbies, your work, your relationships, your love life, and your friends and family. And I think all five are equally as important as each other, right? So success to me is having strong foundational pillars in those five aforementioned areas to build upon.
Mm.
And I think, a successful person has a good balance across all. So they have friends, they have hobbies outside of doing their job. They're still successful in work, but they know when to switch off and know when to
Mm.
spend time with their family. They've got a good relationship with their loved one. They're doing those sort of things. I don't define success as someone who sits there in the office for 12 hours a day and, lets their health completely go and has no life
Yeah,
outside of work. I think
yeah,
that's, yeah, I don't see that as successful personally.
yeah. Can I just add something to that? I think
Yeah.
those pillars that you mentioned, right? So they're, I completely agree. Something I always think about those. Yeah, normally for me, it's about, I've got five different pillars which I
Yep.
care about, things that
Mm.
I want to be doing well in, right? And
Yep.
but I've come to realize that it's almost, I find it impossible to be firing on all five of them at one time. I just can't seem to balance all five.
Yep.
And then, so for example, if you're really doing really well at work, that's one of the pillars. But something might be take a hit, like
Yeah.
you're socialized. Oh, shit, I'm caught up with one of my mates recently.
Yep.
So to me, it's like I've struggled being like, I've just for that striving for that perfection, trying to have all
Yeah.
five pillars, firing at one time. I guess for me, success is like being okay that one of them is slipping a little bit.
Ah,
Do you know
okay.
what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
I
yeah.
just for me it's like an unattainable dream. I just can't have all of them firing at one time. I just it's just something that's not quite. But to me, success is those things, but just being okay with
Yeah, I like
not.
that.
Do you know what I mean? Not beating yourself
Yeah.
up, like. But
And,
yeah,
and
that,
I get what you're saying there. And you're right. I think that is the ideal perfection. And it's probably, not unattainable, but it's very hard to get
yeah,
there. But yeah, I like that actually, mate. You're right. Kind of just allowing you, like not beating yourself up for, having a cheeseburger one night, right? Or something like that.
yeah. Love it. Well, I think that's a great place to end this. That was a really good chat, man. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, sharing your journey, your thoughts on the industry. You're doing some great stuff out there. Um,
Thanks,
keep
Joe.
it up, mate. Thanks again, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah,
David Stuart
perfect.
Watt.